If we want to contact reality, we have to avoid the common traps of the ego. When you first start to understand the mechanics of the thinking mind and realize that you've been living through a low-resolution, mentally generated model or simulation of yourself, it's normal to want to come out of that and into your true self. This can be a trap. Coming out of the delusion of the ego is actually hilariously simple, but it requires razor-sharp discernment, and there's one really common trap that pretty much everyone falls into, including myself, after starting to become aware of the ego and how it works. This trap has infinite mutations, and I personally struggled a lot to break the spell of the ego until I learned to clearly recognize this trap and its many common variations. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I never fall back into the confines of my mental projection of self and reality. I certainly do all the time. But I'm starting to integrate some insights that are helping me to catch it more quickly and snap out of it like never before. The deep yearning in the core of your being to come out of the ego and into your true self is great. But the idea of doing so is one of the deepest versions of this trap. The trap of the ego or the thinking mind is that it can build a mental model to represent everything, including spiritual concepts or teachings designed to help you let go of identifying yourself with your ego. Even the clearest and most helpful instruction or teaching can be intercepted by the mind, which immediately goes to work renovating its mental models of reality to include these nice-sounding spiritual concepts. The mind can instantly create new concepts for each new spiritual idea, and even a concept for the entire process of egoic liberation. We can come out of identifying ourselves with our minds and with our ego, but the second we give any energy to the idea of doing so, we're headed right back into the ego. For example, the guru or the teacher says, "Let go of thinking and be present in the here and the now." The mind says, "That sounds great," and immediately starts constructing a concept called presence and an idea labeled letting go. Sounds great. Okay, here's the idea for presence, and here's the concept of letting go. Bring all of your awareness to rest in the heart center. And here we'll make the heart center and awareness. That sounds great. Don't worry, you don't need to go anywhere unfamiliar. We've got all the presence and awareness that you could want, and even a newly designed, state-of-the-art heart center, where you can go when you just want to let go. Just be. Don't do anything at all. And did we mention that we even have a new program for when you want to just be? You don't have to do anything at all. Sounds great, right? Find the spacious awareness in which everything, including thought, appears. Spacious awareness, huh? I'm on it. I'll find it. I'll keep looking until I find it. Oh, look, a new room called Spacious Awareness.
Spacious awareness.
Oh, wait, the guru says that that's still just thinking? Okay, well, don't worry. I'll keep looking. You count on me. Becoming aware of ourselves and our minds is an ongoing process, and every stage of the process of coming out of ignorance comes with a new variation of this trap. We start out ignorant of the fact that we are constantly thinking, compulsively lost in the story of the mind. Constantly thinking is all we've ever known, so we don't even really realize that we're lost in the story. Then we become consciously aware of the issue. It's like, whoa, I'm always absorbed in my thoughts, like without even knowing it. Sometimes I barely hear the person talking to me because all I hear is the blah, blah, blah in my own head. I need to get out of my head and into the present moment. And boom, out of the first stage of ignorance and immediately into the trap and into the next stage of ignorance. One of the most insidious versions of the trap is thinking that you need to stop thinking. Identifying yourself with a mental model of a person who needs to come out of the ego. Who wants to come out of the ego? It's a version of your ego that wants to come out of the ego, supposedly. It's your concept of a self that says it needs to figure out how to let go of a concept of self. It seems to me that the true self can't want to let go of the ego. It just lets go. Think of it this way. Your mind is racing with thoughts about whatever. As soon as you realize that your mind is racing, there comes the thought that you would like to stop thinking. Before you know it, you're trying to fight compulsive thoughts with another compulsive thought, piling the thought of not wanting to think on top of the other thoughts. Of course, the more energy you give to the thought that you want to stop thinking, the more power you give to the thinking mind in general. This is a common everyday scenario for most people, even if you don't consider yourself spiritual or have any concept of letting go of the ego. Maybe you've learned about meditation or breathwork or whatever techniques supposedly help with the overthinking. So you sit down to meditate, all the while reinforcing the idea that you're a person that needs to do something in order to stop thinking. Eventually you learn about the sense of identity. You learn that you have this whole system of thoughts and beliefs and concepts which form a sense of self that is often called the ego. Maybe you even realize this for yourself in a moment of clarity, just a flash of insight. Even a sincere, deep realization of the ego often transforms into a concept of ego. And with that concept and with the understanding often comes the idea that I need to get rid of this ego. Then the concept of being on the path of dissolving the ego forms, and before you know it, you believe that you're a person in the process of overcoming the ego, which of course is just a sense of identity built on a set of ideas about not identifying yourself with a set of ideas. We can go very deep down this hole. I certainly did. The simplest thing in the world, just noticing thoughts without identifying with them, becomes this infinitely complex labyrinth in the concept of how to notice thoughts without identifying with them. Do you see how tricky this can be? But also so obvious and simple to catch once we know what we're looking for and really start paying attention. Part of what makes this tricky is that the core of who you are can simply stop giving energy to the ego in any moment. But feeding the ego is a deeply rooted pattern whose mechanisms spin below the level of our conscious awareness. Learning the concept of ego is not the same as truly becoming aware of the ego, nor aware of the complex subconscious machinery that keeps it spinning out of control to dominate our attention and sense of self. What we often call becoming aware of the ego means developing an ego which includes a concept of ego in this just absurd meta Russian doll scenario. The conscious desire to dissolve or even downregulate the ego is an idea which ironically becomes baked into the structure of the ego. So giving more energy to that thought just keeps the whole cycle going. It's not your mind that can let the mind go. It's you. Of course, that can sound confusing. We've spent our whole life lost in thoughts, believing we're the thinker without even knowing it. We didn't even realize that we're actually this space in which everything, including thought, can be noticed. You've probably heard that before. Any decent meditation teacher will say these kinds of words, but it's so easy to miss. So easy to not actually discover the space of awareness, but to discover the concept of the space of awareness. They tell you, you are the awareness or the observer. Those words pass through the filter of the mind, and the mind generates another concept titled awareness. And it runs this simulation of what it imagines awareness must feel like. Maybe it's a pleasant simulation, but it's still a trap. Still lost in the mind. Still missing the point. Still reducing the vibrance of reality. Still generating energy-intensive mental models. Still working way too hard at something that requires no mental energy, only discernment. Every step along the path from ignorance to awareness is a new opportunity for the trap to spring up in a new form. Awareness of ignorance turns into knowledge of ignorance. And knowledge can be empowering if kept in its proper place, but it easily turns into the foundation of a trickier ego than before. Even knowing we don't know can be a trap. I want to take this moment to acknowledge that we are touching on some of the most profound questions of human existence, including the story of eating from the tree of knowledge. This whole series on demystifying the ego is really stretching my limits, so I'm putting in a lot of effort to try to clarify my thoughts, to reflect deeply on my personal experience, and to refine and organize my thoughts for you in the best way that I can, while still leaving space for them to continue evolving, which they certainly will. This absolutely has to be both an individual and collective process, so I really want to hear from you about what resonates with what I'm saying and what you see differently. So now back to the trap of knowing, and the variation of knowing that we don't know. In the first video of this series, we talked about how the mind goes crazy in the background, trying to understand and figure out everything, even though that's impossible. Knowing it's impossible to know is another common variation of the trap. We'd hope that by realizing that the mind can't figure everything out, that would open some space for it to relax and stop trying so hard and come more into the background. But this rarely happens, at least not for more than just a moment. Even when the mind consciously realizes that the universe is too huge to understand, that concepts, reason, and planning may be very useful at times, but have huge limitations, and that maybe it's not the best tool for the job, it rarely accepts this and takes a step back. Instead, it does a slick maneuver. It creates a mental box titled, "I can't know everything," and jumps into it to shield itself from actually facing the reality of uncertainty. It turns the true realization into just another thought in the train of thinking. Instead of letting go and dissolving into the mystery, it creates a concept for the mystery. That life is uncertain, mysterious, and complex gets reduced down to another ultra-low-resolution mental model, which feels more manageable to the mind. Then the ego continues running the show, happily knowing, in theory, that it doesn't know, even happy to wisely proclaim to others that it knows it doesn't know, rather than surrendering to the reality that it can neither understand nor control most aspects of life, an acceptance which would force it to step back and integrate itself more subtly into the hierarchy of our systems. How many times have you heard someone say, in a seemingly wise tone of voice, "Oh, life is mysterious. There's so much I don't know." I can sense that life is mysterious. I can sense that vast void of all I don't know, and allow my sense of knowing to just dissolve away into it. Or I can say with absolute certainty that I don't know. At any point, I can allow my mind to turn the totality of my true awareness into a little representation of it. The fact that I know about this trap can be a mutation of the trap. My mind could easily fool me into thinking that I'm now immune to these traps because I see them clearly and can finally articulate them well. Or trick me into thinking I'm awake because I know that I'm not immune to them. Or trick me into thinking I'm lucid because I know that I'm not necessarily awake just because I know that I'm not immune to these traps. And on, the dream within the dream, the labyrinth of mental models, layers and layers deep. That's why it's so tricky to even talk about this. It's almost dangerous for me to talk about it, since teaching what I've learned opens that door so wide for me to buy my own mental story about being a person who understands and avoids the traps of the ego, which is only true if I don't believe that it's true. A hilarious little paradox. If I just keep noticing the constant opportunity to fall into the trap, moment by moment, but don't step into it, then I'm good. But the second I start thinking that I'm avoiding the trap, boom, I'm gone again. So how do we know when we're connected to reality, or when we're just connected to our concept of being connected to reality? How do we know when we're really present, or when we're just thinking about presence? How do we know when we've let the mind go and are really just resting in the heart center, and when we're just imagining it? Let's talk about it in the next video in the series for demystifying the ego and understanding the mechanics of the mind. If this video has helped you to more clearly see this trap, and this series is helping you, then consider subscribing to the Harmonious Reality newsletter, which is a movement for cultivating harmony inside and out. I love you. Thank you very, very, very much for being here.